All right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It's Dr. Ephraim. Today's date is October 27th, 2022. And before I go on with this lesson, I want to welcome all my new subscribers. And even if you've been here for a while, make sure you hit that subscribe button and select all, so you'll be notified every time I upload a new presentation or a new lesson. All right, hit that thumbs up and comment, because I'm not sure if YouTube, when I upload a video, if YouTube, informs everyone, because just from the standpoint of being curious, like when I make a presentation, whether it's a lesson or thinking out loud, I would think that the video would have more views based on the amount of subscribers I have, at least the new subscribers, but I don't know. I mean, they say that I don't know how it works. All I know is that just kind of thank you all for continuing to do your part, and liking the videos, and commenting, and sharing the ones you feel led to share, because all that helps. I'm still in the rebuilding phase of this channel, basically. So, I'm just going to keep plugging away, and, that's what it is. Like I said the other day, there's a lot of stories throughout Black history that have not been told and deserve to be told. And this is one of them. The lesson I'm going to give you all today is that this man's name was Denmark Vesey, and he's from where I'm from, Charleston, South Carolina. And this man, many of you probably have never heard of him. Probably, don't know who he is or what he did or whatever. Well, actually, he didn't do anything. That's kind of the point. He was most famous for what didn't happen, actually. But today I'm gonna try to give him his recognition, his flowers, if you will, for the heart he had, because basically he planned the biggest slave revolt, that never happened. And we'll get into exactly why and this and that. But yeah, say his name, Denmark Vesey. Some of y'all have heard of Nat Turner, or whatever. But see, Nat Turner did a lot of killing or whatever. See, Denmark Vesey didn't do all that. He didn't kill anybody, right? He just planned the biggest slave revolt that never happened. So, real quick before I get into that, from the beginning of time, our people are just like that. We sell each other out. We'll go against a righteous man to back, the devil-filled one, or the one who's not kind of evil or bad, quote unquote. That's how we've been. Yeshua HaMashiach went through that on the cross. But before they put him up there, it was like, who y'all want? Him? Or I think it was Barabbas. I'm not sure, the other dude, the robber. They wanted the robber. They said crucify Jesus. That's our people for you. And to this day, it's hurtful. And that's him going through that. And all he did was heal the sick and make the lame walk. And and our people said kill him and give us the criminal dude. Like that's crazy. But that's our people, man. That is our people. As hurtful as that sounds, and to this day, that's our people. We'll come against the righteous man and back the dude that don't mean him no good more than nothing. Don't mean him no good. That's our people, But anyway, let's go ahead and get into this story, man. Because this lesson right here is about Mr. Denmark Vesey. Let's see who this man was and what he did and what happened to him. Let's get it. All right, Denmark Vesey. There he is, ladies and gentlemen. They said he was born in 1767. They don't have exactly when. And he died in 1822. They said he was an early 19th century free black and community leader in Charleston, South Carolina, Chucktown, as we call it, who was accused and convicted of planning a major slave revolt in 1822. Although the alleged plot was discovered before it could be realized, Its potential scale stoked the fears of the antebellum planter class that led to increased restrictions on both slaves and free blacks. They said he was likely born into slavery in St. Thomas. Vesey was enslaved by Captain Joseph Vesey, and he was biracial, by the way. He was half black and half white. They said he was enslaved by Captain Joseph Vesey in Bermuda for some time before being brought to Charleston. Of course, a lot of slaves came from the West Indies or Barbados, because my foregrandfather on my mom's side came from Barbados. He was Bajan. It says there Vesey won a lottery and purchased his freedom around the age of 32. They say he had a good business and a family, but was unable to buy his first wife, Beck, and their children out of slavery. Vesey worked as a carpenter and became active in the Second Presbyterian Church. In 1818, he helped found an independent African Methodist Episcopal, AME, they're very popular here too, congregation in the city, today known as Mother Emanuel. The congregation began with the support of white clergy, and with over 1,848 members, rapidly became the second largest AME congregation in the nation. Wow, I didn't know that, and I'm from here. Wow. In the summer of 1822, Vesey allegedly used his substantial influence among the black community to plan a major slave revolt. According to the accusations, Vesey and his followers planned to kill slaveholders in Charleston, liberate the slaves, and sail to the newly independent Black Republic of Haiti for refuge. By some contemporary accounts, the revolt would have involved thousands of slaves in the city, as well as others who lived on nearby plantations. City officials sent a militia to arrest the plot's leaders and many suspected followers before the rising could begin, and no white people were killed or injured. Vesey and 5 slaves were rapidly judged guilty by the secret proceedings of a city-appointed court and executed by hanging on July 2nd, 1822. Wow. Vesey was about 55 years old. In later proceedings, some 30 additional followers were also executed. Another group, including his son Sandy, were convicted of conspiracy and deported from the United States. City authorities ordered that Vesey's church should be razed, and its minister was expelled from the city. Manuscript transcripts of testimony at the 1822 court proceedings in Charleston, South Carolina, and its report after the events constitute the chief source of documentation about Denmark Vesey's life. The court judged Vesey guilty of conspiring to launch a slave rebellion and executed him by hanging. The court reported he was born into slavery about 1767 in St. Thomas, at the time a colony of Denmark. Captain Joseph Vesey renamed him Telemoc. Historian Douglas Egerton suggests that Vesey could have been of Comarati or an Acon-speaking people origin. Biographer Dave Robertson suggests that Telemoc may have been of Mandi origin, but his evidence has not been accepted by historians. Telemoc was purchased around the age of 14 by Joseph Vesey, a Bermudian sea captain and slave merchant. Little is known of the life of Joseph Vesey, though the Vesey family is one of some influence in Bermuda, more recently producing notable businessmen and politicians, including Master Mariner Captain Nathaniel Arthur Vesey and his son Sir Nathaniel Henry Peniston Vesey, CBE, known as Henry Vesey, and John Ernest Peniston Vesey, CBE, 1903-1993, MP for Southampton Parish, and grandson Ernest Winthrop Peniston Vesey, 1926-1994. After a time, Vesey sold the youth to a planter in French Saint Domingue. When the youth was found to suffer epileptic fits, Captain Vesey took him back and returned his purchase price to the former master. Biographer Egerton found no evidence of Denmark Vesey having epilepsy later in life, and he suggested that Denmark may have faked the seizures in order to escape the particularly brutal conditions on St. Dominique or Telemaque worked as a personal assistant for Joseph Vesey and served Vesey as an interpreter in slave trading. On November 9th, 1799, Telemaque, or Denmark Vesey, won $1,500. Wow, that was a lot of money for back then, in a city lottery. At the age of 32, he bought his freedom for $600 from Vesey. He took the surname Vesey and the given name of Denmark. After the nation ruling, his birthplace of St. Thomas. Oh, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. He took the given name Denmark after the nation ruling his birthplace of St. Thomas. Denmark Vesey began working as an independent carpenter and built up his own business. By this time, he had married Beck, an enslaved woman. Their children were born into slavery under the principle of partis secreta filium, by which children of a slave mother took her status. Vesey worked to gain freedom for his family. He tried to buy his wife and their children, but her master would not sell her. This meant their future children would also be born into slavery. Wow, man. Along with other slaves, Vesey had belonged to the Second Presbyterian Church and chafed against its restrictions on black members. In 1818, after becoming a freedman, he was among founders of a congregation of what was known as the Bethel Circuit, or of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. This had been organized in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1816 as the first independent black denomination in the United States. The AME Church in Charleston was supported by leading white clergy. In 1818, white authorities briefly ordered the church closed for violating slave code rules that prohibited black congregations from holding worship service after sunset. Even after gaining his freedom, Vesey continued to identify and socialize with many slaves. He became increasingly set on helping his new friends break from the bonds of slavery. In 1819, Vesey became inspired by the congressional debates over the status of Missouri and how it should be admitted to the Union, since slavery appeared to be under attack. Vesey developed followers among the mostly enslaved blacks in the Second Presbyterian Church and then independent AME African Church. The latter's congregation represented more than 10% of the blacks in the city. They resented the harassment by city officials. Economic conditions in Charleston area became difficult since an economic decline affected in the city. In the year of 1821, Vesey and a few slaves began to conspire and plan a revolt. In order for the revolt to be successful, Vesey had to recruit others and strengthen his army. Because Denmark Vesey was a lay preacher, when he had recruited enough followers, he would review plans of the revolt with his followers at his home during religious classes. Vesey inspired slaves by connecting their potential freedom to the biblical story of Exodus and God's delivery of the children of Israel from Egyptian slavery. In his 50s, Vesey was a well-established carpenter with his own business. He reportedly planned his insurrection to take place on Bastille Day, July 14, 1822. This date was notable in association with the French Revolution, whose victors had abolished slavery in St. Dominique. News of the plan was said to be spread among thousands of blacks throughout Charleston and for tens of miles through plantations along the Carolina coast. Both the city and county populations were majority black. Charleston in 1820 had a population of 14,127 blacks and 10,653 whites. And on this date, October 27th, 2022, we still have no power structure here as black people in Charleston, South Carolina. It is still the status quo here in Charleston. White on top, blacks on the bottom. Doesn't care what your background is, how educated you are. They do not want black men in positions of authority or power here in Charleston, period. You won't go to any place of business and see black managers. Every once in a while, you might see a black female manager, and you will never see a black man as a manager here in Charleston, unless he's really good at selling cars and he's a sales manager for some car lot. You just won't see it. You walk into a restaurant, all you see is whites in the front, where the blacks at, in the back, in the kitchen. And this is 2022, man. Nothing has really changed here in Charleston. That's how it is when you look like me. But anyway, I had to give a little sidebar real quick, because I'm born and raised here. Vesey held numerous secret meetings and eventually gained the support of both slaves and free blacks throughout the city and countryside who were willing to fight for their freedom. He was said to organize thousands of slaves who pledged to participate in his planned insurrection. By using intimate family ties between those in the countryside and the city, Vesey created an extensive network of supporters. His plan was first to make a coordinated attack on the Charleston Meeting Street arsenal. Once they secured these weapons, these freedom fighters planned to commander ships from the harbor and sail to Haiti, possibly with Haitian help. Vesey and his followers also planned to kill white slaveholders throughout the city, as had been done in Haiti, and liberate the slaves. According to records of the French consulate in Charleston, his group was reported to have numerous members who were quote-unquote French Negroes, or Creole. Okay. Slaves brought from Saint Dominique by refugee masters. Due to the vast number of slaves who knew about the planned uprising, Vesey feared that word of the plot would get out. Vesey reportedly advanced the date of the insurrection to June 16th. Beginning in May, two slaves opposed to Vesey's scheme, George Wilson and Joe LaRoche, gave the first specific testimony about a coming uprising to Charleston officials, saying a, quote, rising was planned for July 14th. George Wilson was a mixed-race slave who was deeply loyal to his master. The testimonies of these two men confirmed an earlier report coming from another slave named Peter Prelude. Though officials didn't believe the less specific testimony of Prelude, they did believe Wilson and LaRoche due to their unimpeachable reputations with their masters. With their testimony, the city launched a search for conspirators. Joe LaRoche had originally planned to support the rising and brought the slave Rolla Bennett to discuss plans with George Wilson, his close friend. Wilson had to decide whether to join the conspiracy described by Bennett or tell his master there was a plot in the making. Wilson refused to join the conspiracy and urged both LaRoche and Bennett to end their involvement in the plans. Wilson convinced LaRoche that they must tell his master to prevent the conspiracy from being acted out. The mayor, James Hamilton, was told, as he organized a citizen militia, putting the city on alert. White militias and groups of armed men patrolled the streets daily for weeks until many suspects were arrested by the end of June, including a 55-year-old Denmark Vesey. As suspects were arrested, they were held in the Charleston workhouse until the newly appointed Court of Magistrates and freeholders heard evidence against them. The workhouse was also the place where punishment was applied to slaves for their masters, and likely where plot suspects were abused or threatened with abuse or death before giving testimony to the court. The suspects were allowed visits by ministers. Dr. Benjamin Palmer visited Vesey after he was sentenced to death, and Vesey told the minister that he would die for a glorious cause. So he was, he was sold out. That's what our people do, man. I mean, it's been going on since the beginning of the time. I mean, he was sold out, and let's see here. I don't want to. Okay. It said on October 7th, 1822, Judge Elihu Bey convicted 4 white men for a misdemeanor in inciting slaves to insurrection during the Denmark Vesey slave conspiracy. Okay. These four white men were William Allen, John Egesius, Andrew Rhodes, and Jacob Danders. The men were sentenced to varied fines and reasonably short jail time. Historians have found no evidence that any of these men were known abolitionists. They do not seem to have had contact with each other or any other of the plotters of the rebellion. William Allen received 12 months in prison and a $1,000 fine, which was the harshest punishment of the four. When tried in court, Allen admitted to trying to help the slave conspiracy, but said that he did so because he was promised a large sum of money for his services. Wow. Reports from the judge show that the court believed that Allen was motivated by greed rather than any sympathy for the slaves. Wow. The other white conspirators' punishments were far more lenient than that of Allen. John Egesius was sentenced to a $100 fine and 3 months in prison, as was Jacob Danders. Egesius was found guilty of inciting slaves to insurrection, but Danders was charged for saying that he disliked everything in Charleston but the Negroes and the sailors. Danders had said this publicly after the plot had been revealed. City officials thought his comments suspicious, so Danders was found guilty for showing sympathy to the slaves who had been caught ostensibly as part of the conspiracy. The final white defendant, Andrew Rhodes, received a sentence of 6 months and a $500 fine. There was less evidence against him than any of the other whites. Wow. Yeah. It says the Denmark Vesey house. I remember my people had showed me his house downtown. And if I'm not mistaken, I think his house is actually still up, if I'm not mistaken. But it says right here, the Denmark Vesey house in Charleston, although almost certainly not the historic home of Vesey, was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1976 by the Department of Interior. That's the man got killed, hung for inciting an insurrection. In 1976, his house was determined a historical landmark. Wow. From the 1990s, African-American activists in Charleston proposed erecting a memorial to Denmark Vesey to honor his effort to overturn slavery in the city. The proposal was controversial because many white residents did not want to memorialize a man who they considered a terrorist. Of course, he was never accused. He never actually did anything, but they said he was considered a terrorist, though, because he just had the audacity to want to try to be free and free his people, right? So he was a terrorist. So this whole propaganda thing was going on way back then. Once they label you, put that false narrative out there, whatever, and get more people saying it and believing it, boom, now all of a sudden you're demonized and you're a bad person. So whatever happens to you, no one cares, because that's what propaganda does. That's what it's supposed to do. Demonize a person or a people so that anything that happens to them, there's no sympathy or empathy. I mean, it's classic. It goes on to this very day, man. He said others believed that in addition to acknowledging his leadership, a memorial would also express the slave struggles for freedom. Well, by 2014, the changing demographics of the city and nation had changed, and white objections were no longer considered important. The Denmark Vesey monument, representing Vesey as a carpenter and holding a Bible, was erected in Hampton Park. I used to live right down the street from Hampton Park on Maverick Street, at some distance from the main tourist areas. And during the 2020 NFL season, Arizona Cardinals wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins wore a decal on his helmet with Vesey's name. So rest in peace to that brother, man, and everyone else that was involved with that uprising that just never, the greatest slave revolt that never happened, right? And because our people sold him out, they snitched on him, snitched on the massa. That's how it be, man. That's how people be. Like I said, man, I go to my grave saying it. We represent the best and the worst, both at the same time. Real talk. But anyway, my brothers and sisters and sojourners and everyone else, that is the story of Mr. Denmark Vesey from Charleston, South Carolina. So if you didn't know about him, hopefully this gave you, gave you some information on them. If you want to research them more, I'm pretty sure a lot more is out there, whatever. But until next time, hope y'all enjoyed it. This Dr. Ephraim signing off, saying Shalom, elect.